Elite Dangerous is one of my favorite VR games, but the reason I've held off doing a performance test for this title is because I haven't revisited it for a couple of months now. In the game, I'm currently quite away from the nearest space station, sections of the game which are notoriously demanding. Without the stations as part of the test, it isn't really complete. However, while I continue to travel on, I decided to post the first portion of this performance test to give people an idea of how the game runs with an RTX 3080. My full system specs are in the description of this video, but I will post another video regarding performance within stations at a later date. For now, in this video, I'll cover performance in space and on planet surfaces. With that, let's take a look.
Immersed robot.
I started out in the depths of the void, running the game with generally custom settings at a Steam VR resolution scaling of 150%. Keeping my index at 120 Hz refresh rate, I was generally maintaining 120 frames per second here. You can see my custom settings here. For the sake of this test, I decided to experiment with the VR-specific presets in-game, so I selected VR Medium and continued. Removing some of my custom settings and using the Medium preset helped my frame timings by a millisecond or two, and the game felt very solid in space locations. I decided to find the nearest planet and head down to the surface. As I continued to travel through space towards the planet, constant 120 FPS was easily maintained, so I ramped things up by selecting the VR Ultra Graphical preset. This pushed things into reprojection, and I was on near constant 60 FPS at this point. The VR high setting tended to fluctuate between reprojection and persistent attempts at native frame rate, settling on reprojection as the planet drew closer. I moved back to VR Medium, and once again I was back to running the game at 120 FPS. As my altitude over the planet became lower, there were frame rate drops, although after the glide, I seemed to generally run at a relatively stable 120 FPS. I tried to increase the terrain quality settings to make the planet look a little better, and frame rate was still quite stable, although pushing things even further seemed to cause intermittent reprojection from kicking in. I experimented with various terrain settings while on the planet's surface to mixed results, so eventually settled back on the VR Medium setting. Once landed, I explored the surface in the SRV. Here frame rate would fluctuate once again between native 120 FPS and occasional reprojection. After driving around the surface for a while, I took to space again and traveled to another system. After briefly trying the full spectrum scanner with no performance issues, I found another planet to land on. On my way to this planet, I decided to lower the refresh rate of my index to 90 Hz and once again push the graphical preset up to VR high, which ran at a comfortable 90 FPS as I approached the planet. GPU and CPU frame times were both relatively solid, although as I got closer to the surface, the glide section once again affected performance with intermittent drops. Once past this, I could maintain almost solid 90 FPS until my altitude became very low. At this point, performance was a little inconsistent. I switched over to 80 Hz, and in spite of very slight fluctuations, this gave me a reasonably solid experience. However, when I climbed back into the SRV, performance became more inconsistent. At times 80 Hz on these settings was fine, other times it would spike. In conclusion, Elite Dangerous is still a demanding game, with highly fluctuating frame times, depending on whether you are located in space or on planet surfaces. I expect space stations to behave in a similar, or even slightly more demanding way to planets. There are a myriad of graphical options within this game, far too many to cover in a brief performance test, but there are many ways to dial in your performance within this game. I tend to set the game so I run at native 120 FPS in space, while happily relying on solid reprojected 60 FPS in space stations and on planets. This seems to work best for me. I hope to make another video on Elite at some point in the future when I return to more populated areas of the galaxy with various space stations to experiment with, but for now I hope this gives you some idea of how the game runs on a PC with similar specs to mine. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Well, that's pretty much it for this video. Please hesitantly tap the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more concise and informative VR content. You can also join our Discord by clicking on the link in the description of this video. And, as always, I'll catch you on the flippity flip.